Hello and welcome to Basics for Gamers presents the Basics of Crafting Part 2. In the previous course we discussed the process of crafting most common items, and in this one we're going to take it a step further and talk about special situations like crafting magic items and forging weapons and armor from precious materials. This video will be providing an overview of the process, and if you would like to see examples of how crafting works, then check out the companion video that is linked in the description. Crafting magic items works exactly like crafting everything else, but there are a few points that you will want to pay close attention to. First, each type of an item requires a different formula to craft. If an item's listing shows multiple types, then you need a separate formula to craft each type. You cannot craft a greater coyote cloak with a regular coyote cloak formula, and you can't craft a regular coyote cloak if you have a greater coyote cloak formula. Those are considered to be wholly separate items, each requiring their own formula. And second, pay attention to the craft requirements section in the item's description. This area will show you anything extra needed beyond the norm. In the previous course, you learned that there are 6 requirements that must be met before you can start crafting. We are essentially adding a 7th requirement here, which is simply do whatever is listed under the craft requirements heading. More often than not, these requirements are going to say something to the effect of supply a listing level casting of the spell. This means that during the initial 4 days of crafting, someone must cast the specified spell at the required level in order for that item to be crafted. So for example, if you're making a major staff of abjuration, then someone will need to cast alarm at 1st level, and then cast alarm again heightened to 3rd level, and also cast dispel magic once at 2nd level, then again at 4th level, and one more time heightened to 6th level, and so on until all of the spells at all of their listed levels have been cast. You would not need to cast Shield as part of the crafting process because cantrips are not listed level spells. When casting spells to meet a crafting requirement, remember these key points. First, the person who is doing the crafting does not need to be the one casting the spell. There's no requirement for them beyond having the magical crafting feat. Therefore, anyone can be the one who actually casts the spell. If you're making a fireball scroll, you do not need to know how to cast the fireball spell yourself, but instead can have a friend cast the spell for you as part of the crafting process. Second, a spell slot must be used when casting the spell. In other words, you can't use a charge from a staff or a wand to cast the spell that's needed to craft another staff or wand. The energy of the spell must come from a person. Third, there are no other effects when casting the spell. When you cast a fireball spell for the purpose of creating a fireball scroll, you're not going to blow up your house. Likewise, when casting a wish spell to make a luck blade, you don't also get to make a wish. The energy of the spell is safely transferred to the item and there are no other effects. And last, when casting a spell as part of a crafting requirement, you will likely need to pay any associated costs with casting that spell, except if you are making a staff or a wand. So for example, you're crafting a 2nd level scroll of continual flame. It says here that there is a cost of 6 gold worth of ruby dust in order to cast continual flame. If you're making a 2nd level scroll of continual flame, then you must provide that cost in addition to the regular cost of crafting. But staves and wands are different. If you're making a 2nd level wand of continual flame, you do not provide any of the usual spell cost when casting the spell as part of crafting. Although I haven't seen it spelled out in the rules, I believe the key distinction here is that when someone uses a scroll, it is consumed and you do not need to provide spell cost at the time that the scroll is used. But with staves and wands, which are not consumables, you do need to provide the cost each time the spell is cast using the staff or wand, and therefore you do not also need to pay that spell cost upfront when making the staff or wand. Bottom line is, you should only be paying the cost once per actual use of a spell. And while we're on the topic of spells and magic items, it may be worth mentioning that magic scrolls and wands cannot be used to cast cantrips, focus spells, or rituals. They can only be crafted to cast regular spells. You cannot create a wand to cast your favorite focus spell or make a scroll to cast a ritual. And also, don't make assumptions about when you need to have a spell cast as part of crafting. If it doesn't say that you need to, then you don't. The skeleton key, for example, casts the knock spell when it is used, but does not require a knock spell to be cast when crafting a skeleton key. Likewise, people sometimes assume that potions that cast spells when you drink them require those spells to be cast when you are making and brewing those potions, but it is incredibly rare for that to be the case. Bark skin potions, for example, do not require anyone to cast the bark skin spell when brewing them. In fact, the person who is crafting the bark skin potion doesn't even need to know how to cast that spell or have the ability to cast spells. All the information needed to brew that potion is entirely included in its formula. Beyond these tweaks, crafting items, regardless if they are wands, scrolls, potions, wondrous items, whatever, they all work exactly as we outlined in the previous course. You need to provide 50% of the cost of materials up front and spend 4 days working, at the end of which you make a crafting skill check. If successful, you can either choose to pay off the remaining balance or spend another day working to lower that balance. And since potions and scrolls are consumable items, they can be made in batches of 4. In addition to magic items, we also want to discuss forging weapons and items with uncommon materials. The items we discussed in our Crafting Part 1 video all assume that you are using mundane materials like wood or iron. But in the world of Pathfinder, there are many more exotic materials that can be used when crafting, such as cold iron or adamantine. Crafting weapons or armor with precious materials is pretty simple. It works just like regular crafting, but there are a few special points that we need to discuss. As usual, you must provide materials equal to 50% of the item's price up front. But if you're making something with precious materials, you can't just pay the cost out of your pocket in gold or silver coins. Instead, you have to somehow source the precious material that's needed as well. For example, you want to forge a cold iron warhammer. When we look up the stats for cold iron weapons, we see a few things worth noting. First, precious materials are categorized as being low grade, standard grade, or high grade, each with their own stats, like how magic items are listed with varying types. Each grade requires a different formula. So if you have the formula to craft a low-grade cold iron weapon, you can't use that same formula to make a standard grade cold iron weapon. We also see it has a listed level. Warhammers are level 0, but when crafting with precious materials, you must meet or exceed the level of the base item or the material, whichever is higher. So you would need to be at least 2nd level to craft a low-grade cold iron warhammer and 10th level to make a standard grade hammer. But the big difference comes when we look at price. Here price is based on the bulk of the item that we are making. In this case, a warhammer is 1 bulk. So a low-grade cold iron warhammer has a price of 40 gold plus 4 per bulk, making the price of this hammer 44 gold. This is the same price for any weapon that is only 1 bulk. You do not add the cost of a normal warhammer to this. Also note that you always need to pay for at least one bulk. So if the item that you are crafting is light bulk, then you treat it as being one bulk for the purpose of calculating its price. When we start crafting, we must provide materials equal to 50% of the price up front, just like always. In this case, that would be 22 gold worth of materials. Next, we look at the craft requirements line in the description. Here it says that of those 22 gold pieces, 22 silver pieces of that must be cold iron. All of this special material is needed up front. We do not provide 11 silver worth of cold iron now and another 11 silver worth of it later. So before we can start crafting, we need 198 silver pieces worth of regular general materials and specifically 22 silver pieces worth of cold iron. This is all of the cold iron that we will need for this project. After 4 days of work and a skill check, we have the option, as usual, of paying the remaining balance of 11 gold to complete it, but none of that needs to be cold iron. It can just be paid in 11 gold coins. Crafting armor from precious materials works the same way, except you need to adjust its bulk. The armor table shows the bulk for each suit of armor assuming that you are wearing it. When crafting, you use the armor's carried bulk, which is one more than a suit of armor's worn bulk. So you simply add 1 to the bulk that you see listed in the table. If you were crafting adamantine chainmail, you would calculate its price using 3 bulk instead of 2. In this video, we discussed a few more advanced applications of crafting, namely crafting magic items and forging weapons and armor from precious materials. If you would like to see examples of the crafting process, then check out the companion video that is linked in the description. Crafting magic items works the same as crafting anything else, except there are a few key points worth remembering. First, each different type of an item requires its own formula. Second, many magic items have special requirements. These are listed at the bottom of their stat blocks and often say something to the effect of supply a listing level casting of the spell. This means that every spell that the item can cast must also be cast as part of the crafting process, and they must be cast at each of the levels listed in the item's description. The person who is doing the crafting does not need to be the person who casts the spells as part of crafting. That crafter does not even need to know how to cast these spells. A spell slot must be used to cast each of the spells that are cast as part of the crafting process. You cannot use an item to cast a spell as part of creating another item. And unless the item that is being crafted is a staff or wand, then you must pay any associated costs for casting the spell. When you cast a spell as part of the crafting process for creating either a wand or staff, you do not pay for those spell costs up front because you will pay those costs later when you are casting the spells with the wand or staff. We also discussed forging weapons and armor with uncommon materials. This works exactly like normal, but again there are a few points worth mentioning. First, precious materials are not categorized as types like most other items are. Instead, they are listed by grade: low grade, standard grade, and high grade. When crafting with precious materials, the item level of the finished item is the higher of the base item's level or the level assigned to that grade of special material. Often, the price for items crafted from precious materials will be based on bulk, and the price will always be at least one bulk, even if the item that is being crafted is light bulk. If the item is armor, remember that the armor table in the book shows its worn bulk. You must add 1 to this number to calculate its actual or carried bulk. Also, the item's description will tell you how much of the initial 50% material cost must include the precious material. This is all provided at the start, and no more precious materials are needed after day 4 of crafting. Before we close, I'd like to take a moment to thank all of our patrons. These videos would not be possible without their continued generosity and support. Members of the Basics for Gamers Patreon community receive special benefits, like getting to vote on the topics that we cover in the future, and also they get to see these videos 1 week and ad-free before everybody else. Visit the link shown on the left of the screen and in the description if you'd like to know more about becoming a patron. If you would like to support this channel and help it grow, the easiest way to do that is by subscribing and clicking the bell icon so you get notified when new videos release. And we can always be reached through our Twitter and Facebook pages too. Thanks for watching, take care, and we will see you soon with more Basics of Pathfinder.